asked us to start without him. So if you would join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Note for the record that all council members are present except Councilmember Conway, who will be joining us shortly.
Thank you. And a report out from closed session? Would we do that?
The council did meet in closed session for the purpose of public employee evaluation, namely the city attorney and the deputy city attorney. We had a very long and productive discussion, but there's nothing to report out at this time.
Thank you. And this brings us to the workshop portion of our agenda to provide direction to the Baylands Sustainability Committee for finalization of the draft Baylands Sustainability Framework. And I believe we have a presentation.
Yes, we do, Madam Mayor. Just a brief introductory remark. The draft framework in front of you tonight represents a culmination of a number of years' work of the Baylands Sustainability Committee. I'd like to recognize our council members Miller and Lentz for their hard work on that group. Also had representatives from Open Space Ecology, Park and Recreation Commission, and Planning Commission served in that committee as well. This is a culmination, again, of several years' work. The council has seen several previous iterations of this document, and it was also presented to all three of the advisory committees in their entirety, and all three were provided the opportunity to comment. And before you tonight in the packet, you do have the comments from the three different advisory committees. And with that, I'll turn the presentation over to Andrea Traber of Integral Resources.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. It's great to be here. We've been working together for quite a while now, and this is a great document. Do I present to you, or shall I also be talking to these guys?
Speak to the cameras.
Got it. Okay, so as John mentioned, we've been working on this document for a little over a year. At least that's been my participation. The committee has been doing it, this for a little longer than that. Before we get into it, I wanted to present, just for some context, a map of some of the key and major projects that are happening around the region. That really, these are mixed-use projects that have a high sustainability goal, just to indicate that this is really happening in the Bay Area in a very strong way. Some of the current projects are actually going for net zero energy, water, and waste, while not necessarily following the same framework that we have. It's all these topics that we address in our framework are being discussed at many projects throughout the Bay Area, and I think that's great. So I just wanted to present this to you. For this framework, we basically are using the One Planet Living framework, which is a combination of 10 principles all around sustainability and sustainable development. So what I'm going to do tonight is go through those at a high level, not in great detail, just to mention that the full report is on the web for everybody to look at, and it has been reviewed. I wanted to talk just briefly about the purpose and approach. This is really clearly not a regulatory document. This doesn't replace the EIR. It is intended to be visionary about sustainability possibility at the Baylands site. We thought of it in a very comprehensive fashion, so basically every aspect of sustainable development that can be thought of at a development like this has been reviewed and thought about. And really it's to kind of inform the negotiation process, so as you go into that negotiation, these are the principles, key performance indicators, and implementation strategies that might be considered and discussed. And just to mention the process, John mentioned this a little bit, but the Sustainability Committee met very regularly and comprehensively. Very much valued the input of Park and Recreation, Open Space and Ecology, and the Planning Commission. And I also did have a chance to read the comments. I thought they were all very good comments and can easily be addressed and incorporated. And I appreciate the time that the committees took to do a very thorough and comprehensive review. So let's move into the 10 sections. And what I'm presenting here is basically the key principle and then some examples of how it's implemented and some key things to know about for each principle. So starting with zero carbon buildings, I'm sure many people are aware of the move towards net zero energy. Energy use at the building level being a very key factor in zero carbon buildings. So this is really a strong focus in this section. And essentially what we're saying here is zero carbon buildings would produce as much energy as they consume on site as much as possible. That will not always be possible for large buildings potentially, but if we think about this development site-wide, there is a chance that this could happen here. So, and just to point out too that in California, the building code by 2020 will require net zero energy buildings for residential. 2030 will be required for commercial buildings. There are many buildings around the Bay Area that are achieving this already. An example here of Kilroy's project in San Francisco as a net zero office building in a dense urban setting. There are also net zero residential multifamily projects around the country and the Bay Area, as well as commercial projects. These are two examples here. And so this is, I would dare say, this is not a huge challenge. This is achievable at this location and thought about early on. Moving into the next principle about zero waste. I know we're all very aware here too with many cities around the Bay Area actually have a zero waste goal, including San Francisco and San Mateo County, and many others are developing this. Essentially, really trying to narrow that gap between and reduce diversion of landfill to zero. There are various metrics and certification possibilities. I would say there is not, at this point, a clear winner between the UL Environment's goal. They provide 3 different ways to measure this and give various zero net ratings to whatever level is achieved, but there are third-party certifications that can help guide how this metric is developed. In the report, we have laid out many strategies that are highly doable. I would also just mention that Recology is obviously very close to the site and has a very strong zero waste program. So I would hope that would really be capitalized on here for the Baylands. And just to mention too that there are some new technologies that are being incorporated in large projects. Vacuum waste collection systems are happening in Europe in dense developments. They are starting to be looked at and incorporated in major developments here in California. We've worked on some at our firm already, but this really increases the diversion rates because it makes it much easier. Multifamily is very challenging to get a high diversion rate just because it is physically challenging for people to take their waste to certain places. So just wanted to incorporate some of the technologies that are being used here. And then there's much of a zero waste goal is really dependent on operational practices, so behavior. And there is a lot of guidance in the Bay Area, in particular around residents and businesses, what they can do to improve their waste diversion. So lots of resources here. Moving into sustainable transport. This is really key, obviously, to sustainability, really linking housing, jobs, and transportation in a mixed-use setting. Very dependent on transportation. Here at the Baylands and in Brisbane, you have the benefit of the Caltrain, and that plan would be to really expand that as a multimodal station, have it really be used. Connectivity to San Francisco could be really strong. and Caltrain is already doing some of that planning. Just to mention some of the other things that are happening, bike share program in the Bay Area has been extremely successful. It's now going out to many, many cities throughout the Bay Area. San Francisco launched it a couple years ago, and they have since put in many more bikes. This is really encouraging transportation at that last mile, you know, how you either can't get to the station or can't get from it to where you're going. This is a strategy for that last mile that is challenging. It's also going to be a strategy throughout the Baylands and throughout developments, in addition to pedestrian ways and so on. And just to point out, this is happening even in places like Normal, Illinois. So this is a phenomenon that is here to stay, which is a good thing. Talking briefly about local and sustainable materials, I think also we're aware culturally of the intense use of materials in buildings. The Baylands vision very much includes use of sustainable materials, whether they are renewable, reclaimed, recycled resources, have low embodied energy, which refers to the amount of energy to extract, manufacture, use, and reprocess. There are many good standards for materials these days. FSC, Forest Stewardship Council certification of wood being one, but there are many others. And just to mention too, that life cycle assessment, so looking at the entire life cycle of materials in the design and construction process is now much more feasible than it has been. And we think this is valuable for many of the major materials that would be used in the development. There are processes and tools that can do this now. There are also labeling programs such as Declare that will provide full transparency of what is in the material, both from a health but also a material perspective. So this is becoming much more feasible in design and construction of projects too, and this is actively being pursued on projects. Now talking about local and sustainable food, and the idea here is that the Baylands could encourage local food growing and use here at the site, and probably unlikely that it would be 100% of the food consumed in Brisbane or the Baylands, but it could be a portion of it. And what I'd like to point out here is that if you look at the pie chart on the right, about 60% of the energy use in food happens before it ever gets to the store or the table. So a local strategy can very much remove that footprint, if you will, of food. And also, I would just say too, it's a very great community builder. Urban gardens and farmers markets are also really valuable from that perspective. So this farm to table concept is absolutely catching on. You have control over the health and quality of the food that's produced, and it's very much a community builder, in my opinion. So a few things that are actually already happening here. You have the Green Hearts Family Farm CSA right in San Francisco and San Mateo. You have farmers markets. The Go Box program is very interesting. This is a reusable to-go box that restaurants can use. This is coming to San Francisco. It's out of Portland and Seattle. So there's many strategies here that can really reduce also the footprint of the containers that we use in packaging. Moving into water, all important water required for survival. Big topic in California these days, obviously. Many strategies are included in the framework to really reduce water. I don't know if this is an aside, but if folks caught one of the votes in San Francisco last week, it will become mandatory in about 30 days after a comment period to reuse water on site. So gray water and black water processing on site will be law in San Francisco shortly. That's a huge step. The good news is it's feasible. So, it requires planning and it requires an understanding of the water use and sources on site. But there are many strategies, both at the landscape level, but within the building that can be incorporated. So we've gone into a fair amount of detail in the framework on that as well. And just to mention some additional specific things that are starting to happen, San Diego already looking at a recycling wastewater plant that's treating water to potable standards, so drinkable standards at a central treatment plant. And also to mention the green infrastructure that is, probably we're all very familiar with this, but bioswales and to really treat stormwater runoff so it's not going into a stormwater system that you then have to process, and it's also replenishing plants. And it's very much a natural system. This is highly feasible. Moving into open space and habitat, I would just say that the Baylands and Brisbane in general enjoy a very rich, wonderful habitat in the midst of a fairly urban environment, and you want to keep it that way. And you've had a lot of activism over the years around San Bruno Mountain and developing, I think, is the nation's first habitat conservation plan. Just encourage you to think about this site as yet another piece in that evolution, and really think about the open space areas. I think that can be done very well in this plan and in this framework. We have addressed this. Really the idea of kind of a network of green and accessible open spaces and keeping habitat alive and well. We've already got the Mission Blue Nursery in San Bruno, integrating pathways and so on that connect to the nature that is around the city is one of the key strategies. Talking about culture and heritage, again, Brisbane has a lot of great history here that is very important to you as a community. And so really this is about restoring, say, the roundhouse and some of the key elements, thinking about the function that the railroad has provided in the past, thinking of it as a modern transportation route, really also celebrating the art and the nature that exists here. I think this is really important because really, in order for sustainability to flourish, there needs to be a lot of community pride and giving back and being part of the community. And this is culture and heritage really seeks to bring people in and to care about the community. And I think that's as much a part of sustainability as some of the technical requirements. Thinking also about economic vitality with equity and ecology, and I think the equity piece is very important. We have, here in the Bay Area, things are skyrocketing, housing prices being one, and really you have to think about the economic vitality that includes jobs, housing, and all other access. So thinking about how that is integrated here in the Baylands, there are opportunities to increase economic vitality through incorporating, affordability into the plans. Many of the plans that I mentioned early on are really looking at, the market rate level of housing, if it is incorporated, looking at the affordability index, very important, and integrating that with the sustainability and ecology is also key, very important. Moving into health, safety, and happiness, very important for this to be a healthy community, of course. We mentioned here another One Planet Living neighborhood in Bainbridge Island, and really it's a very rich, mixed-use, multi-dimensional community, high happiness index. But this is very important. I think, again, this incorporates many, both design strategies, but really making this a pleasing place to be and to inhabit, work, play, keeping the community that is here, and then adding to. That is it. That was probably less than 20 minutes, John. But if there are questions or anything we'd now like to do, here I am.
Thank you, Andrea. Did the subcommittee want to make any comments first?
I'd like to ask our consultant explain a little bit more about the One Planet Living concept and why we think it's a relevant one for this particular project, and also the structure of what they're expecting us to look at in terms of the components that are in the framework.
Right.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and we could go back actually to that first slide there. Who does this go back? Yeah. So One Planet is really developed around the idea of the fact that right now we as a country use about 5 planets worth of resource, which is not very sustainable. The idea here is that the goal is really to kind of get down to levels of one planet living, hence the name. That is really challenging. It's a big gap, obviously. But these 10 principles have been developed to be a real guide and a commitment to, it at our building level, thinking about zero carbon, so that there is an equal balance between what you use and what you produce renewably. And so for each principle, the commitment really is to hit that zero target over time. It does not mean tomorrow, when this project is approved or not, that it's expected to meet it then, but there is a plan and a phase-in toward that goal. This One Planet does do a certification of sorts, where they would review your plan and determine if it does meet the One Planet goals. This has been developed with that in mind, so that it could meet those goals, could be reviewed and certified by One Planet. So for each of the 10 principles, we've thought about that. And we haven't decided, as you know, when or if it would be certified, but it is certifiable, we believe.
And the components, the international
Summary,
summary
context,
and
and key performance indicators.
targets and.
Right, yeah, the certification of the plan is the
All that stuff.
the principles, key performance indicators, and strategies are part of the plan. They would be reviewed, and there would probably be additional requirements on some of the implementation strategies that would need to be linked up with the actual plan, in my opinion. Would have to relate to the actual plan that is to be certified. And that hasn't been quite done yet, because this was done as a framework. Does that make sense?
So for example, if I may, right? So the first principle is zero carbon buildings.
Right.
So the first section is context. So it talks about the things that are happening in the Bay Area, throughout the world, things that are happening in Brisbane. And then the next item is the summary approach. And so, how, well, those things that are happening out in the world, how do you bring them here to this particular development?
Right.
And then, then the key performance indicators. And so, yeah, so if you could just dive a little bit deeper
Okay.
into those
Got it.
areas for us.
Okay, so taking zero carbon buildings, for instance, the key principle to match your production and your use with a net zero carbon result, mainly focused on energy. So that is the high level principle. These strategies that are, or the key performance indicators, are basically, a zero net goal resulting from that. And what I mean by having to then relate it to the plan is that you have to look at the plan and, for each building and site-wide, look at the energy use, energy consumption, determine if it is net zero carbon or how it would get there over time. So each of the KPIs has that a metric embedded within it, and there are suggestions, for instance, of right now targeting buildings to be 30% better than the existing code for energy performance. That's a fairly good target now to put you on the way towards a net zero carbon building. And then the strategies are, or the implementation approach is really, a finer grain of how you would actually employ that on the site and in the project. So each section has KPIs and an implementation approach, which are really strategies at the project level. That clearer? Fuller? Okay.
I think it'd be better to get the questions from the council, and then, well, you know what, there's one thing I just want to talk about. Of course, Andrea said that this has been many year long process, and it's taken a long time, but this is a big deal, and there really wasn't a real good approach for us to take, and so we had to try and look at examples that were out there, and turns out there's a One Planet Living project in Roner Park called Sonoma Mountain Village, and Ray and we went up to Roner Park to check it out, and we're very impressed with that development. And we thought, okay, maybe that framework that they're using might help us to engage the community about sustainability. And we really liked the 10 principles and how it not only were these principles that were there, but it also provided the verification on the other end to make sure that, okay, yeah, if we go down this route, we have someone that's got our back. It was also very important that this plan that we have before you came from the community. That it wasn't consultant driven, it wasn't developer driven. It came from the community. So it was the council members, Ray and myself, and along with members, a representative from Park and Rec, a representative from the Planning Commission, a representative from Open Space and Ecology Committee. And through the course of a few years, we've evolved and gathered information from all over the place, and also getting feedback from UPC, from the developer, in the final stage, which is the implementation approach. Because in order to move forward with a project, you need to have a partnership, and so that's where we are right now, and we're pretty excited about this plan and what it can do for Brisbane. But also what it can do for the Bay Area and perhaps the country and the world, because we live in a very unique place that putting forth sustainability goals and aspirations such as this would be, I think, not only advantageous to bring in investment, but also to change the course of how humans do development and interact with each other. So, not too bad for a small little town like Brisbane to be able to have an opportunity like this to work on such an amazing project. So,
Thank you. Go ahead.
I have a few questions and comments and quibbles. And, I kind of curious that on page 5, the lead for neighborhood development, and I see a map up here about lead neighborhood development, or lead ND, N as in Nancy, D as in David, or neighborhood development. Make a statement that the Sustainability Committee could consider the following approaches as discussed points with project sponsor. And you have a list of like five of these on page 5 and 6. This is different than One Bay Area or the One Planet Living. What's the thought process here?
Andrea, should probably answer that. I mean, the thing about One Planet is that it does look at it looks at rating systems that already exist.
Mm-hmm.
In the U.S. is the lead system, and so incorporating some of those standards can accomplish the One Planet goals. So you could probably explain a lot better than me, Andrea.
Right, no, that's fairly right on. And this was something I brought to this planning process, which was that One Planet is very aspirational. Imagine trying to meet One Planet's resources on this project. It's a challenge. It is hard, but worth striving for. LEED ND concept here is that it could be a bridge to meet some of those. LEED is a well-accepted system for sustainability in buildings and communities in California, especially the Bay Area. And so what we did is in the very last page of the whole report is a LEED ND scorecard. We actually lined up many of the credits in LEED with the One Planet Living principles, and there's a lot of overlap. There were 3 additional that we thought were important that you might also include, and they were the health, safety, and happiness, and economic vitality with equity and ecology, I guess 2 additional, that aren't really covered by LEED well. I think you'd still want to, if this was a path that was chosen for this project, I think you'd want to define, what credits and you'd want to go through that with the project and determine what their metrics and how they would achieve it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another question on page 10 at the bottom paragraph that begins with finally. I'll read it. It says, finally, all energy for space conditioning, ventilation, water heating, lighting, and plug loads will be generated on site from solar on buildings and possibly from on-site solar farm, wind turbines, heat exchange technology, and biomass. My thought is to eliminate the word turbines for wind turbines and say generators, because turbines, you're kind of specifying a specific type of wind generator. I think you want to be more generic in what you're wanting to specify.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, that makes
Even though it's
sense.
a guideline, it's just more of a quibble, and it's my suggestion.
That's a good one.
Page 14, when it's under figure 12, David and Lucille. Lucille's got 2 L's, I believe.
And actually, in her case, it's only 1.
Is really?
I've checked that
I've
4
gotten
times.
stuff, and I looked that up. It says 2.
You wouldn't be the first one to
Yeah.
make that comment.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, on page 15, the high-speed rail, it's talking about the infrastructure tunnel, and this is just more of a comment. It has to do with high-speed rail. And this is my comment to my colleagues here, that this is something I felt all along that should happen, that if this high-speed rail thing ever happens, that it should be channeled under the peninsula and not put on top of what we currently have, and it should be magnetic levitation and not the goofiness that they want to do for the traditional electrification of trains, and I believe Caltrain should be electrified in situ. But that's just a comment that I'm just digressing a little bit. But and we probably should use some of the acronyms for the KWH. I think that stands for kilowatt hour per square foot per year.
Yes.
And we probably should just, write that out for some folks that maybe not be overly technical.
A glossary was requested.
Yeah.
We tried to define as many as abbreviations as we.
Page 17, under the heading of context, on the second paragraph, we talk about purpose. It starts out for purposes of solid waste, and in it says, the city, it's about the third or second sentence, the city has curbside pickup for recyclables and food waste collection and has implemented a polystyrene bag ban. And then down below, we say the same thing in the second to the last paragraph. It says the city of Brisbane adopted the county's polystyrene bag ordinance. And since we adopted that, we've also adopted another ordinance. So I would suggest that we strike the one up above, and down below, say the city of Brisbane adopted the county's polystyrene bag and eating products ordinances. And I'm referring also back to page 40. This is my comment here, and I can give you all this stuff. talking about local and sustainable food. Because in there it mentions a few of the things also about the slide that you showed about the reusable products. But we've adopted that ordinance also, so I think that we should make reference to both instead of just one, because I think that's the purpose of it. But I know that this was written before we adopted the second ordinance, and that it's, I agree with Commissioner Doe comment that this is a living document, because there's a lot of technologies that will change along the way. And bear with me here, I don't have a whole lot. To do with, on page 43, it said, right next to the picture about the picture you showed with the reusable container, it said, restaurants and stores will be required to use reusable or compostable containers for food to go or to develop methods to reduce food waste. And that is now in our ordinance, so. And that was part of that reference to that. And also with the page 51, page 50, this has to do with water. And I know I've had numerous conversations with our city engineer, but at some point, because we're looking out into the future, there may have to be desalination plants built, to gain water. I mean, because we don't really know exactly what's going to be down the pike. We can assume that things could be catastrophic or, potentially will be. But as technology goes along, that may be what's now economical to do, even though it's very expensive right now. So, I mean, we should kind of at least make mention, since we may consider this a living document, to future availability of that as a way of, obtaining water. And then also on page 51, we've talking about, we've used the term, I think in the open space plan, wetland river park, but I don't see that term used in here. It's referred to, but you got to kind of think about it. You know what I mean? And I think that we should use common tech and terminology in one document to another document, so that way they kind of align. You know what I mean? To where, because if I'm not familiar with it, then I'm hunting. And if a person's not even aware of it or cognizant of it, then, they're really going to be hunting. So I think that that's a proper thing to do. And overall, I really liked the document. Page 59, the third paragraph, it says, Brisbane has a strong record of purchasing property to be dedicated as open space. Continued effort should be made to create funding mechanisms to purchase property on the slopes of San Bruno Mountain to increase protected habitat. And it goes on to talk about Ice House Hill, and, if we're talking about baylands, is this just something to kind of like talking about to try and integrate or try to look for funding mechanisms from the baylands development? What's the thought process there? 'Cause,
Yeah.
or is that just making a general statement?
No, I think both. When we've had our discussions, it's about how do you connect the mountain with the bay? And you have this development that's right in the middle. And that open space shouldn't be used as a barrier, but it should be used as a way to integrate, to connect not only the mountain with the bay, but also to connect us with the baylands. We take a lot of pride in San Bruno Mountain. That's kind of our, like our mascot. And so we should be, looking at open space in that same way. And, also using open space as a carrot as being something that makes a development better. That it isn't all about density and what type of, work amenities you have, but having open space, being connected to nature also is good for the soul and good for people who are working out there. And, and if we can incorporate, that type of approach, there might be other funding opportunities to, to implement and also to maintain.
Thank you. Page 62, under recommended implementation approach. And, we talk about all the different aspects of doing different things there and creating public parks and usable open space. But again, it doesn't specifically specify a wetland river park by that nomenclature, and that we should, again, from a continuity purpose. This is on page 67, where we talk about recommended key performance indicators, and this has to do with some of the restoration things and also agriculture and things like that. And one of the things that I had brought up, this is back when we were in a community center, and I'm thinking it was 9 or 10 years ago, on what should be covered in the EIR. That's how long we've been working on this. It's probably long before your time, right? And I brought up studying raised bed farming, which is agriculture. But agriculture was not studied in the EIR, right? As far as I know. So we're putting stuff in here that really wasn't studied in the EIR. And so, we might have to go back and do a supplement of it. But, raised bed farming, the whole purpose of that is that you create a barrier and then you use compost and that type of stuff where you are not directly using the ground there. And it's, been successful in other things of not being able to have toxins and other stuff migrate up into it, so. I'd like to see at least a comment. I don't know if, what our deal is on that. Page 71, bottom paragraph starts off the city of Santa Clara. I think city needs to be capitalized, right? Quibble.
Okay. No problem.
And I think probably that was, overall, I'm very impressed with the body of work that the subcommittee has done and staff. It's a monumental effort, just to put this into verbiage, and in the practicality of it, it's even going to be a larger monumental effort, so it's going to be interesting. You see how all this shakes out, but I want to say kudos to the subcommittee, planning commissioner, open space ecology, and park and recs commissioner who participated in that. I think they got 1 or 2 here tonight, and staff, and thank you.
Sure. Should I stay here for more comments, in case there are? Or-
Sure.
I think Commissioner Liu has some questions or comments
Yes, thank
for
you.
you.
So I also just wanted to echo my colleagues' words of appreciation for the amount of time and effort that's gone into this. It's quite substantial. It took a while to get through, but there's a lot of really good information in it. And I think, we talk about we want to have a sustainable development at the Baylands, but we don't really know what that means. And I think this is really good towards putting into words and pictures what that can look like and what specific goals we can use to reach those, to reach that goal of having a sustainable development and to be a model. I like the idea of framing it in the one planet living sense of, it makes everybody more mindful about what resources it takes to build and operate a development at the Baylands, to really realize, what is going to be used in terms of energy, what sort of output and waste it's going to produce, and to aspire to have it as much of a net zero as possible, I think is doable in certain places, and will serve as a model. And I'm glad to hear that it's been done elsewhere already. So I've never seen any document like this before, and I'm curious if you could talk about, are there other examples of where this has been used, where there's been a sustainability framework developed, how this even came up, how we came up with this in the first place here. And how you've worked on this.
Yeah, so Cliff mentioned Sonoma Mountain Village, and to be very specific, that is a One Planet Living community. It's actually restarted. Its sustainability plan was done before the Great Recession, and it has stayed intact. They got all their planning approvals with it. They developed a smart code to support that plan, which was very wise. Did that before the crash. It's now back, and they are starting to develop it now that the residential market is definitely back. So that is one very literal interpretation of One Planet, and that was developer driven. The developer there, Cotting, chose One Planet Living and went with it in a very strong way as they developed their plan. So that is one great example. Basically, all community scale projects now are looking at a sustainability approach. Some are choosing LEED ND, but there's a sustainability plan. It's not just the credits, and we all know LEED is a bit of a checklist. However, there's a lot of strategy and approach that's very important behind that. So, I mean, really, literally, I have probably 10 projects right now that are going through a very similar exercise where they look at the variety of systems. There's also the Living Community Challenge that has just come out. That's a next iteration of the Living Building Challenge at the community scale. And so this is happening, definitely. It's a very current topic. And so the framework idea is that, choose a framework that has really solid principles and then see how you implement it. It is a living document. I would reiterate that strongly. We've done our best to guess the future. We don't know exactly what it's going to be. There is some directionality around what we know. But really this is the method that developments are using. I put on here City Place Santa Clara. That's a 4-block, 9 million square foot project. Very mixed use. They went through this same exact process of, okay, let's get our arms around sustainability and what do we mean? And so very similar process. Mm-hmm. We did not use One Planet there, but we developed all the, baseline scenarios and strategies and metrics for energy, carbon, waste, water, and transportation. They didn't go as far into food and things like that, but kind of the big ideas were very well addressed. So this is definitely happening.
Great. And just some feedback. I saw one of the commissions or committees had mentioned having a table of contents. I want to reiterate that because I got lost in the document. It's hard to tell, was this referring to the material that came before or after? So I think it would be extremely helpful to have
a glossary,
high-level summary and table of contents so we can just follow along a little bit better. Just a couple of high-level comments. I'm on the countywide board that's looking at the community choice energy, and so I noticed there was some reference to that about seeing if we could have obtain energy through a community choice energy or aggregate. It's called CCA, but we're looking at it as a CCE, Community Choice Energy Program, so to make sure we get the right terminology. And one thing that wasn't mentioned in here, which is I think something that should be, is that not only do we want to look at whether we can obtain energy from the CCE, but provide energy to the CCE at the site. I know that the county is aware that the Baylands is a potential site for energy generation. In talking about transportation, there were some comments about making sure that the Caltrain or the Third Street light rail is accessible to the Baylands through shuttles, I suppose, or to the Baylands at various points. But I also think that another thing we want to encourage is connection from the Baylands to central Brisbane. And it's always irked me that there hasn't been an extension of the Third Street light rail. It just, sort of stops on Bayshore Boulevard. And, if only it would continue, or if only there was some way for us to connect to it, maybe through a shuttle system. So, to be able to have a connection through public transportation from central Brisbane to either the Third Street light rail or within the Baylands, I think we need to make sure we have that, or we encourage that connectivity as well. I was happy to see the focus on food. Personally, recently, I've been trying to do a whole food, plant-based diet and have learned a lot more about, just awareness of where my food comes from and what resources are used to provide that food. So I think, there's a number of places to get vegan food in the Bay Area, and I think having the Baylands try to encourage that even more would be in line with that. And as for the housing mention, I thought that was interesting that the framework mentions that housing is not permitted at the Baylands and talks about it, and then says, well, if it were to be allowed, this is what we would ask for. And I think that it's not the city, it's not up to the city in this document to take a position on that issue. So I would suggest being as neutral as possible and not saying, it should be or shouldn't allowed, but this is what is allowed in the general plan, and this is what the developer has presented, and these are the options, and if it is allowed this and if it isn't allowed that. But I would steer clear of taking a position on that issue. I did have a number of line-by-line comments. It might take quite a bit of time to provide that, so I'd be happy to just in writing send you my comments. They're more typographical and detailed and minor at this point. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Ray?
The only response I'd like to make to Laurie and Clark, thank you. And this goes back to what Cliff was saying before, that for our original model of this kind of a report, we used the Sonoma Mountain Village, which has really the same format. So that's where we started from, 6 years ago, whatever it was. And it really is structured in a very similar way. And so since then, a lot of cities have moved in this direction. And so at that point, we were looking, pretty much as pioneers and out there on the development fringe. But now we're kind of moving with the flow. Karen Kinzer and I went to this conference last summer in Sacramento. There are cities like Lancaster in Southern California that, they're committed to net zero energy, and they're really proud of it. And Los Angeles has a sustainability plan. Actually, Santa Monica's had one for maybe 15 years, So this isn't exactly something that we are unique in now. We really are on a whole trend, I think. And I think it's becoming not only attractive for the community, as Cliff was saying, but I think it's attractive from a business point of view. It says that, we're keeping up with the times. We are responding to the concerns of the future, and we are connected to what is the responsible thing to do. And so I think it really can make that argument as well.
Thank you. I know this document took a lot of work from everybody on the committee, and I'm sure that there's been many different views on it, how it all is going to be a working document. And I think that's, for me, one of the important things is that it changes because as time goes on, because with our green building ordinance and, we were cutting edge, and now we're not. Because, we sort of rested on our our laurels of having it before it really even got implemented. It was out of date, and so to have it a working document, I think is really important, that it can morph with how technologies and sustainability goals change. I did have one question for you. On the map that you're showing now, the Sonoma Mountain Village you have listed as net zero energy water waste. And then the City Place Santa Clara, you have net zero energy water waste. Is that a different project?
No.
Or it's just,
No commas in the,
because that changes the meaning?
fair enough. It's meant to be the same. And just to say, Sonoma Mountain is following all these principles. So I was just highlighting kind of some of the key principles there.
And when you talk about Sonoma Mountain following the principles, you said that's a private development?
It is a private development, Cotting
So the
developer.
private developer is paying for the infrastructure
Yeah.
for it?
And the whole certification process and so on.
They have a solar production program that we hear is actually quite profitable,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, no, actually, it's very interesting what Sonoma Mountain Village has done since they first did their plan and then the recession hit. They've had, they're using some of the space already and have been for several years for commercial incubator space. They've kept their zero carbon footprint at pace. They put in a megawatt of solar first off to match the demand for energy. And then as they've added commercial space, they've increased their solar capacity. So that even though they're not fully launched in their One Planet program, they're keeping pace as the project is growing and being developed.
So when you say net zero energy waste, water and waste, so they're taking care of their sewage on site? They're not?
Yeah, that has not been fully implemented yet. That is a waste and water treatment on site that kind of takes some scale to be effective and be able to perform it on site. So they have not incorporated all the zero waste and water goals yet. They will as they bring in the residential developments and start to build those out, and they'll phase the infrastructure with the development. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yes, yes, thank you. It's my questions for the moment, and I really do want to thank both our consultants or all the consultants that have worked on this, because it's been a bit of a change throughout, and the hard work that the subcommittee's done and all the staff work and the subcommittees, open space and ecology, and all the comments that have come from the different groups. A lot of hard work.
Yes, yeah. I also wanted to thank you, Andrea, for being an amazing consultant and really helping the committee to do the final leg of this document. That was part of the delay. We had someone who left and trying to find the right person to lead us the rest of the way. And I'm just going to say it, I'm really glad that we did make that change, because you've been excellent in really helping us to shape our voice of what we'd like to see. This document is called a framework, not a plan. And the reason being is that it's not a plan, right? These are goals and aspirations. It's supposed to be used as a tool to help with the planning process. And so, yes, something like housing is not prohibited in our general plan. And we worked really hard to massage those words to make sure that we are not saying housing should happen. We're saying that if the community decides that housing is particular land use out at the Baylands, here are some examples, right? Here are some things to take a look at. I'm also just really glad that we've incorporated using One Planet, because the One Planet is a brand. Everyone is familiar with the London Olympics, And the London Olympics partnered with One Planet to create the first One Planet Olympics. And One Planet's also partnered with the World Wildlife Federation. And so they have probably the best reputation on the planet when it comes to creating a sustainable framework. And so the Baylands is an amazing opportunity. We got San Francisco in the north and Silicon Valley in the south, and here we have this blank canvas with every mode of public transportation potentially accessing that site. And we have all this creativity, it's the innovation capital of the world. And so for the Baylands to not strive to be the most sustainable development that it can possibly be, I think would shortchange not only the area, but us as a community. And I think we owe it to ourselves to really engage as a community and decide, okay, well, what do we want to see for the Baylands? Here we have this opportunity, and not everyone gets an opportunity like this. I mean, it really is an amazing opportunity. And here we are, this small town. But sometimes when you're a small town, you can get together, right, and really take in those opinions and really shape the future that you want to see. Sometimes when you're in a big city, it's difficult to get most opinions, most direction from those important stakeholders. So I'm glad that all of you like this document, and I'm very thankful for that. So I think as far as next steps go, we're going to incorporate your comments that came from Open Space, Park and Rec, and Open Space and Ecology, and work with Andrea to finalize that and come back, I guess, with the final document just so that get your final blessings before it becomes an official sustainability framework for the city of Brisbane.
Thank you. Are there this is a workshop, and I'm wondering if there's any members of the public who would like to speak on this. I see a couple hands. If you'd like to approach and limit your comments to being very brief, and please state your name when you get to the podium.
Hey there. My name is Naveed Safipour. I actually am coming here as representing young people. I'm the president of the Peninsula Young Democrats, and that's a club that focuses a lot on environmental issues and also issues of housing. And I came because I wanted to hear about this project. It sounded particularly unique, especially its approach to sustainability. But I did also want to address the inclusion of housing, and specifically the inclusion of affordable housing, and how that has a significant impact on sustainability, because I do think that's something that needs to be significantly addressed in this report. Lack of housing units below market rate is currently having an environmental impact throughout the whole region. And when we look at these environmental issues, we do have to look at it in a regional perspective. I very strongly believe that. I personally work in Burlingame, and many of my coworkers live in the East Bay, where it takes 2 hours for them to get to where they work. So they end up driving, and that significantly increases the carbon footprint for the region. For lower income workers, driving is the only option, unfortunately, because at this point most of them are living in Tracy or Stockton. Building more office space, of course, increases the number of workers who have to commute, and because office space is being constructed without the necessary housing, both in San Francisco and San Mateo counties, we're seeing this problem just get compounded more and more. And this particular project does present a really unique opportunity. I realize currently housing is not supposed to be included in this region, and that may be revisited. I think addressing that in the report and the benefits towards sustainability of doing that would be something that would be very good to consider and include. Neither county has been achieving the goals for market rate or affordable housing, which is creating this problem. I did actually jot down a few numbers on my way over here. The Association of Bay Area Governments projected that between 2007 and 2014, San Mateo County needed to build about 15,738 units, 3,500 of which were to be very low affordable level, and 2,500 which needs to be low affordability level. The actual number of affordable units that got built were in the hundreds, and the total number of market rate units was only about 6,000. So they only achieved 40% of that goal during that time. And it's because so often when opportunities like this come up, the issue just gets addressed, people have quibbles about it, and it gets pushed aside. San Francisco County, it's the same sort of thing. 32,000 units was the projected amount believed to be needed, and instead they only built 16,000. The affordable units was extremely low. They're in the hundreds, even though they're supposed to build in the thousands. So I did want to just make that statement, and in revising the report, maybe considering that's something to include in a perspective and include, because we do need to have more affordable units if we want to have sustainable communities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Soon to be retired, huh?
Already.
Retired is such a strong word. I'm Bill Knack. I'm here on behalf of the San Mateo County Union Community Alliance, and I want to just start out by applauding your efforts on this framework. And the word that came to mind, if I could put it all together, is wow. This is something else. It's a breath of fresh air to see a section on economic vitality and equity and ecology included in the discussion about sustainable communities. Many times this issue is either forgotten or just plain ignored. We're pleased to see the recognition of the importance of encouraging development and jobs that pay wages with benefits that allow the workers to actually live and work in our community of San Mateo County. We're also encouraged to see the recognition of the need for some level of affordable housing needed in the development of the Baylands if housing is approved. And we look forward to participate in the process to determine what will be developed in the Baylands. There was a little bit of discussion earlier about net zero energy use, and I can tell you that the technology is there and it's being used today. I toured a large building last week over at the IBW Training Center, and that building is probably 3 times the size of this building, and it has net zero energy use. In fact, they sell off energy to the grid. They have no use of natural gas whatsoever. It's not just about electricity, it's about movement of air, which affects the temperature of the building. It's use of different materials that reflect heat or capture heat, depending on whether the sun's in or the sun's not shining on it. So it's really, it opened my eyes, even coming out of construction, how far we've come in the possibility of this. And I'm here to invite any of you, if you would like to take a look at this facility to see how some of this stuff is used. You can give me a call, and I'll talk to the electricians unit. I'm sure that Mark Leach would love to take you on a tour over there. So again, thank you for doing this. This is one of the best documents that I've read in my 16 years as head of the building trades. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Scharfman with UPC. We're the project sponsor for the Brisbane Baylands project. I also want to applaud the subcommittee for reaching this milestone and looking forward to the result being a plan that has very has language that can be understood and acted upon by many stakeholders. Understood simply by the members of the community first, so the community understands what the key goals are and what the tools will be that will measure how those goals are being met as we go along, but also the business and financial community that follows, that would include our company or any financial or development partners that came along in the future. I think it's sometimes too easy in a process like this to forget that in the end there's this very delicate balance that you're charged with in your decision making for the city here, and that is how to reconcile being visionary, being true to the great history and core values of your city, while in the same way kind of taking your place as a part of something much larger, a region that you just have a very significant role in. And I think that's part of our role as on the business end of this discussion as it moves forward, is to just be a reminder of that. And I'm here tonight to just really gently ask you, as you move forward, to please reserve some, maybe 20-25% of your time and attention to really look forward and just ask the questions of how can that three-legged stool of sustainability, the environment, the economy, and social equity all be reconciled in a way that is feasible and can be financed in the future, primarily with private sources. And I look forward to really drilling down into those questions with the subcommittee and in the future in development agreement negotiations to do with this project. But in the meantime, I'd also like to remind folks that our company continues our years-long education program for anyone who would like to participate. And on the fourth Wednesday of every month, we have at our Project Information Center in downtown Brisbane various topics that, as in the past, we've had net zero energy, buildings. We've had some public art discussions. We've had renewable energy discussions. The last one in May was a tremendous presentation on water recycling, which is a very relevant topic here. On June 24th, there'll be one on green walls. One of the region's authorities on the construction and operation of green walls. It can help mitigate temperatures in buildings, attract wildlife, and just be a great feature. And so I will leave some of those flyers out there for folks to look at, and I appreciate your taking the time. Thanks.
Thank you. So seeing no other public participation, is there any wrap-up, or?
I think we kind of wrapped it up.
We've wrapped it up?
Maybe we could be a little bit more explicit about, the final steps here. I guess we probably need some help from the staff on that, because what we'd like to do is achieve some kind of finality with approval from the council, so that we can pass on the document, particularly, of course, to the Planning Commission that has the first task of looking at the final EIR and thinking about planning the Baylands in light of the environmental impacts and other criteria. So I know it's also on the agenda this Thursday. So what is the thinking of the staff as to how we proceed to get this finalized?
I think as the consultant indicated, the various comments that have been made in writing and the comments that have been made tonight, those will be taken, put together into a final package for the subcommittee to review, and if the subcommittee then is satisfied that the document reflects its position, the matter would be returned to the city council as soon as that can be accomplished, and if the council is then also satisfied with it, the report or the framework would be accepted, and then we would move on from there.
And I have a question also. I understand on Wednesday of this week that each council member will be meeting with the consultant. What is the purpose of those meetings? And
That's with respect to the survey,
okay,
not with respect to this particular item.
okay.
So I'm just trying to think about the timing. So if we're going to get language integrated, and Andrea's going to help us with that, and then we're talking about a meeting of the council subcommittee or the full sustainability subcommittee? What are we talking about? Just want to be clear on the process here.
I was talking about the council committee,
Yeah.
subcommittee.
Yeah.
If the council has a different point of view, obviously it's your...
But that was your
But-
suggestion on
but-
finalizing it.
Right. I thought it
Okay.
should go back to the council subcommittee for one final look.
Okay.
And then return to the full council. Certainly at that time, there could be additional comments on it made, but
Right.
but the intent would be that the council then would accept the framework and then...
So sort of the hope would be that that could all happen maybe, by August? Is that the idea? Is that possible?
That seems doable.
Is that feasible?
I think the ball's in our court, right?
Yeah.
So we just need to have the meeting. The comments that were made they're not that extensive.
Yeah,
So the
no, I think all the
document-
comments were good. I don't see any
Yeah.
problem integrating them.
So, but of course, we haven't seen Lori's comments. And
Yeah.
we know Lori, so.
I don't want to keep you up all night. I'll email them.
Yeah,
But I think it's very doable.
but her comments have always been,
Yeah, absolutely.
harmonious with the basic
The lawyer's coming
rest
out in
of
there.
of the document, so I doubt
Details.
that'll be a problem. But then we're talking about the planning commission probably getting underway in the fall, right?
Correct.
Okay, so this would be in time for that?
Yes.
Okay. So they'll be clear that this is the position of the council and then the guidance we're giving them in terms of the sustainability attributes of the project. Okay. All right. Seem okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right, got it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
So do you want to take a 5-minute break before we move into, sorry, Stuart, before we move into our budget hearings?
Sure.
All right.